Hi, everybody. This is Matt from Junk Wax Investor, and I'm excited to announce I have a special guest on for this week's episode. We have Will Stern from Collect.com, and we're going to be going over the top hobby stories of 2024 and what we can see going through 2025. Hi, Will. How's it going?
Hey,
And happy holidays.
happy holidays. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you're our first interview, so really amped and pumped to have you on board for today. Our first question uh, for you, like from your perspective, what have been the top hobby related stories from this past year?
Yeah, so I mean, something that I have found really interesting is the way that Topps now has really transitioned very successfully to the chase card, right? The 101, the signed inscription, my first stolen base or whatever. The Shohei
Mhm.
50/50 was a big one. We've seen at this point we've seen a bunch of big ones. The Olympic trio, one of one that has yet to be found. But each of those really big ones powered insane sales for the base cards because, as we know, like you pay 9.99, whatever it is, for the base card with the chance of getting the one of one that could be worth however much money, right? And Tops Now is not new. I think they've been doing it since like 2015,
Mhm.
16. And this year, I mean, whether or not it's like a new invention or not, but they've leaned into it heavily, and the sales have just crushed. And there's debate as to whether or not it's good for the hobby, and whether printing a billion of these cards is good or not. Sure, but uh, the numbers speak for themselves. It's the marketing. It's a marketing technique, and it's working beyond what anyone I think could have expected.
Are you surprised that one of one card of LeBron, Durant, and Curry autograph card has not shown up yet in public?
It's funny, we talk about this all the time. It's like, is it in a sealed pack that's just going back and forth on eBay? Like, did somebody just open it and not know what they had? I don't know if surprise is the word because it's certainly always a risk, right? But it's definitely like a shame based on the amount of press and the media and how well that was received when it was announced, and the buzz has just died, right? If it's found right now, great card, certainly valuable. But I
Mhm.
mean, it's what, a fifth of what it would have been if it was found immediately and sold. So, that I think that's gonna happen, right? That's just kind of the name of the game. But yeah, no, it's certainly surprising. I don't think anyone would have expected that.
Do you think the bounty will still be as large as it is if and when it does surface?
It's funny. I know there was a bounty on the big Bedard card that that was kind of like revoked. I think that was maybe David Adams, but don't quote me on that. But it's weird, right? Like, it's not like there's some formal contractual agreement, right? With these,
Mhm.
when someone posts a bounty,
Yeah.
I would assume there's probably, I mean, a few of them had expirations on them actually, but yeah, I would bet that if you were someone who had a bounty out there, you might be slowly kind of trying to be like, well, that was for then, not now. But who knows? I mean, look, those bounties are just like the chase cards. Those are marketing, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're putting out prices that are not the value of the card, and it's to get their name out there. The for the Skeens, rookie debut, when the team put out, like, 70 years of season
Mhm.
tickets, and Livy Dunn's gonna hang out with you and be your best friend for years. Like, I don't think that that's probably what they looked at the market and said it is worth that much, but the PR, the press around it's great, and it was really good for the hobby, I think. I think that's one of the stories I wanted to talk about with you and get your take as well. Like, you've seen a lot of kind of outside the hobby brands reaching in like that, whether those are teams, professionally or college from the NIL side, just brands generally. I mean, GameStop, um,
Yeah.
their work with PSA, and now Nat Turner's on their board and everything. Like, that's I think a huge story, and a really positive one going into the next year of like, okay, we're seeing interest from outside our world, right? Like, I think everyone in the hobby tends to look within the people we know and the brands we know as the ecosystem, but it's clear that it's being recognized outside as a market opportunity. And whether that's money coming in or new products or just new availability and ecosystems that just are growing. I think it's a really fascinating and positive trend.
Yeah. Is there like a concern that there might be kind of like an overabundance of this type of like publicity and so many people, all of a sudden kind of getting in to the hobby? Obviously, like it really took off during the COVID pandemic. And then like, on the sports card side, it seems like it settled a little bit, but game used memorabilia has just absolutely skyrocketed.
Yep.
Um, are we seeing like a new turn with that in the hobby? And is there a concern maybe like these like multi-millionaires are kind of maybe like go away from like this game used memorabilia at some point and find something new to collect?
I think it's a concern with anything when you see a really rapid rise, right? I think, look, like I'm sure we'll talk about the record-breaking Ruth called shot
Yeah.
jersey sale. Paying a lot of money for a Ruth jersey is not new. Like that's not like a social media phenomenon, and um, so pieces like that are totally transcendent and don't require some explanation of like, well, if you look at the checklist, it's a one of one from this year and it's some hyped up rookie. Like that to me, I'm not gonna call it like safe or a mature market by any means, right? They're still talking about, the pool of bidders on that is not thousands of people, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you're buying Nike stock, right? But it's hard for me to think that like next year all of a sudden Babe Ruth tanks in value,
Yeah.
Um, but no, look, with anything, it's like, the abundance of massive Jordan sales for jerseys this year has been absurd, right? And could we see next year a correction because everyone who wanted one got one? Maybe, but
Mhm.
also it's Michael Jordan. So it's like it's really hard to predict, but I mean, it's certainly when something goes up with the volume that it has, yeah, I mean, that's certainly a thought, but I think the headlines of these real blue chip pieces, we throughout the ups and downs of the market, especially post COVID, the most resilient stuff is always the blue chip stuff, you
Yeah.
know?
And I'm glad you brought up the Babe Ruth called shot jersey because that sold at Heritage Auctions a few months ago for what was it, over
Yeah.
$24 million. Were you surprised at the amount that jersey got, and with it selling for such like an astronomical price? Will there be any sort of like PSA 10 52 tops Mickey Mantle breaking that record, or any other incredible game worn piece, like maybe like Jackie Robinson's, inaugural, his first ever game in MLB? Is something like that ever top Babe Ruth's called shot jersey, or is that a record that's going to live in perpetuity?
I mean, I don't see that record being broken tomorrow, but will it ever be broken? For sure.
Yeah.
You know? Like, yeah, if Jackie's debut jersey showed up, I would put that as a more important piece than Ruth's called shot because that's forget baseball fans or sports fans, right? Like if you're just like a fan of history or the civil rights movement, like it's just I mean, that's the most transcendent thing that we wrote something after the Ruth called shot, like kind of what else could even be in that stratosphere. And that
Hmm.
was my immediate thought, as I'm sure as you just mentioned. It's like that to me is a piece, and there's no sign that that exists anywhere, right? But I think something that's driven this market in the game worn side has been photo matching and the increased acceptance of it, as well as just increased research. You see stuff that I mean, the Babe Ruth called shots jersey has sold multiple times previously, right? It had never been photo matched, and there's storytelling around that. There's people believe in the authenticity of whether it's My Gray, whether it's Resolution, whoever. And that has proven to be, I mean, even on almost stuff that's been sold 3 years ago and comes back up, like all of a sudden there's it's been matched to this new game that matters, right? There's a Gehrig jersey that actually didn't sell, but it did surpass the record for any Gehrig jersey price that had sold a few years ago for, I believe, like $850,000. And SCP just had it, and they had additional photo matching that showed it was a World Series jersey and
Mhm.
stuff that didn't exist before, and it was bid up to in the millions, and it didn't hit the reserve price, whatever that may be. But that's an example of kind of what I think is a really key piece driving that market. Yeah.
Now there was like maybe like a little bit of controversy over that Babe Ruth called shot jersey because there was actually one photo matching company that did not confirm that was from that actual game. Did anything ever come out of that? And like, how do like two other companies photo match it, but then one doesn't? Like, how does that come about and work?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think so. Just for anyone who doesn't know, photo matching is essentially taking images of, let's call it a jersey, right? And then looking at images taken contemporaneously, comparing it and finding, okay, there's a stitch here that matches, and this pinstripe is in a diagonal direction, and finding details to confirm it, right? So I wouldn't call it an exact science, right? PSA and SGC Beckett, their grading of cards is not an exact science. But yeah, no, I mean, we were reporting in the lead up to it that it did kind of it had been sent in previously over the course of a few years to receive that photo matching COA, and Resolution did not provide that. But MyGray and PSA's new service did. Um, and then, of course, you can get deep into it, where in previous sales it had been mentioned and been called the called shot jersey, but then afterwards it wasn't called the called shot jersey, and you can get real deep into it. But yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, is it's it's really the belief that people have in whatever company it might be, right? MyGray is one of the leaders, as is Resolution. So if you're someone who thinks MyGray does the best job, you trust their photo matching, right? And that's, clearly the buyer was very comfortable with the fact that whatever photo matching was there was sufficient, and they, I'm sure, looked at it themselves. And then there's also the fact, for that specific one, that a Babe Ruth jersey is still a Babe Ruth jersey. There's like six, you know? So that's that's always the point that I think people kind of miss. Like, there was no question that it is a Ruth jersey. Well, I shouldn't even say no question, but I don't, I've never found any reason to believe it's not, right? So even if it's just a Ruth jersey, you're still talking about one of the most valuable pieces of memorabilia possible. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, I think.
And now, from that same heritage auctions, there was actually a much bigger controversy, and that came with the Hank Aaron record-breaking 715th home run bases. Has there been any update with the controversy? Because the Atlanta Braves sent a cease and desist letter to Heritage saying like that property was allegedly stolen. The Hall of Fame got involved because they said, by the way, we have Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron personally gave us the third base bag from the game. And on top of that, years ago, Leland's auction um, purportedly sold the second base bag from that game. How did we get? How did Heritage get to this situation? Did they just not do their research about the Hank Aaron third base bag being a Hall of Fame? Did they not know about that previous Leland's auction? And I
So
guess kind of like what's next with everything.
yeah, so everyone sent each other cease and desist.
Yeah.
There was a lot of back and forth. I think the Hall of Fame is almost its own thing, and I kind of don't know what came of it, whether or not theirs was authentic or not, because it almost is separate from the Braves claim. But the Braves claim that the consigner and the consigner's father, essentially took it, and it was Braves property, if indeed it is the base as described, and it's ongoing, the litigation as to. So I think that's will we uncover in some deposition, like, yeah, I did take it and it actually is the Braves property and has to be returned? I don't know. Whether or not it's up to Heritage due diligence to that degree, I don't know. I mean, look, they sell a million things a year. And this is a rare example of one that came under scrutiny by a team like this. And it's also the question of who owns things like this, right? Like if the
Mhm.
Braves say, well, it's our property no matter what's happened in the decades since. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know how solid that claim is. Perhaps it is perfectly solid. But it's a really interesting question. It's one to think about, like, these people who own milestone things of comparable value or nature. It's like, do they have to worry? I don't think so. But it was a really fascinating one, and one that we're still keeping an eye on. I mean, I know there's kind of continuing updates about, oh, they want to move the court case to this state and that state, so it's ongoing. But it is a really interesting story.
Could we potentially see like other sports franchises doing something like this when like a big auction item like that comes up?
Well, so this was a case where the Braves claimed kind of the Braves looked into the story and said, okay, we know who the consigners are. They were able to basically figure that out. And then, okay, the bases were supposed to be saved and they were taken off. And then I believe what Leland sold was probably the base that was put on after. So for the same game, but they took the bases after he hit the home run. Um, so could we potentially see it? I mean, like in a similar scenario for sure, right? But I think this is a pretty unique one in that, like, the the Braves are essentially accusing the consigners of stealing it, right?
Mhm.
I don't think that's a theme that we're gonna start seeing very often.
Gotcha.
But I will say teams are increasingly becoming far more aware and protective of their memorabilia. And the MLB is a unique case because their authentication program is, like, unbelievable. Uh Matt Liberman, who's also at Collected, an incredible feature on just how deep their program is.
Mhm.
It's like everything's cataloged, every ball, and if it leaves the site of these authenticators who are all like former law enforcement, if it leaves their site, it doesn't even count. It's like, okay,
Oh,
that
no
ball's not
kidding!
real. It's
Wow.
unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, they've got it down to, I mean, it's truly like tracking like police evidence the way they do it. They've got
It's
people
going
that
like minute by minute, like who's like
yeah, so
holding
it's
it.
like that's not happening for a game in 2023, 24 because there's no question, for the MLB, what's what, and they know where it is, and everyone can look up the certification number and be sure.
Moving on from the auctions, kind of getting back into like the sports card industry. What were your thoughts about kind of like the sports card industry in 2024, and where do you see the industry going next year in 2025?
Yes, I mean, look, there's a million different threads we could pick up there, right? I think some of the really interesting stories, they're the obvious ones, right? Caitlin Clark,
Hmm.
amazing. Like, what what the interest and demand for her as she transitioned to the WNBA and prior to it, right? The cards that came out when she was at Iowa, um, was unprecedented for the WNBA, and it was kind of a rising tides lifts all boats situation. Panini had the rights to her to drop those kind of Panini instant cards, and they're selling out like hotcakes at crazy prices, and they were doing it for other players as well, and they were selling really well. So that to me is an obvious story, but a really important one, and just like a great one, just positive in every way, right? Like to have interest in an athlete on the female side, and just what that says about the growth of the market,
Hmm.
how we see the hobby reflecting real life, which is something that doesn't always happen, right? But when
I
you see
feel.
it,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, please.
I feel that with so many on the men's college basketball side being one and done, I feel that we're going to see college women basketball cards um, be valued more than on the men's side because you have players. Obviously, you had Caitlin Clark staying at Iowa for years. You had Angel Reese at LSU for years. You have Juju Watkins, who's been a star at USC for the past few years. Obviously, you have Paige Booker's a star at UConn for years. And I feel like their cards are going to be a lot more valued than the one and dones, on the men's side.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and also thinking about, the Bowman U or whatever college
Mhm.
releases there have been are always kind of valued less than the rookie cards when they make it to the professional leagues, right? But on the women's side, you think about it, and the WNBA is definitely like growing and has had a historic season, but still, the colleges probably have stronger brands still than WNBA teams versus in the NBA versus college. It's not even
Yeah.
close, right? Like the Lakers, as big as Duke is, the Lakers matter more, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So that's an interesting kind of like flip that I think that's a great point. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but I totally agree. And yeah, the longer they play, the more I mean, Caitlin Clark, what she means to Iowa is like, I mean, she is such a legend there and so tied there in a way that you don't see when a player goes one and done and,
Yeah.
it's just not
Like I
it.
feel like people are more connected to like women's college basketball now because these players are staying there for obviously 3-4 years, and and especially fans of the teams, you develop an emotional connection with them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like, I went to Wisconsin, I'm a big Wisconsin fan, and, like, you know, I'd rather a Frank Kaminsky Wisconsin card than him on the Hornets or
Oh
wherever
yeah.
we're playing 5 minutes a game, and that's a weird example because like, his cards are never gonna be worth anything, but, like but I get it, right? He matters more to the team, and I think that's a great point.
Especially with like the way NIL is taking off, you
Mhm.
know, the Frank Kaminsky's of the world would be able to make more money,
Oh, poor
doing like
Frank.
player signings while in college than after their pro careers are done.
Yeah, they're cashing in, and a lot of the way that they're doing that is in the collectibles world,
Yeah,
and that's awesome just in a I'm happy that college athletes get to make money off their likeness for once, right? It's long overdue, but it provides a new injection of supply in an interesting way into the market that didn't exist before.
yeah, 100%. What were some like kind of like the surprising trends you saw from the hobby this past year?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that I w I w I wouldn't call this surprising because people saw it coming. When collectors sold Golden back to well, they sold Golden after having bought it in recent
Mhm.
years, right? Sold to eBay. And then PSA announced their integration with eBay. And they've continued to roll out features there to the point where you can get your cards graded, vaulted, press, send to auction via eBay, never touch it. And stuff like that, that frictionless integration is super powerful. And I find it personally, as someone who's not grading a ton of cards, like I have in the past, but recently I haven't like, oh, you know what? Like I might want to send this. I've got a couple of Jalen. I'm a big Knicks fan. I've got a couple of Jalen Brunson cards I've never bothered grading just because I like them, whatever. But oh, maybe I'll have it graded sitting there in case all of a sudden the value goes up and I want to
Mhm.
shoot it over to eBay in a way where, you don't if you just trying to sell it yourself. I mean, eBay is just the biggest place to sell this stuff, right? So that's so important, I think. And they've obviously offered like they're now rolling out. You can see the pop report and stuff. So I think eBay leaning into it has been a big deal. More surprising stuff, I think. Let's see. I mean, set collecting has always existed, but we've seen some really crazy sales for like random dudes from
Mhm.
sets from the 50s and 60s just because it's like maybe the pop one PSA 9 or 10. And that's been really cool. We just saw the massive uh, record for the Hulk Hogan card. People are really bullish on wrestling cards. I don't know how I feel about that. I have never watched wrestling in my life, so
Really? You never watched
I
wrestling?
didn't grow up with it.
Uh-huh.
It's not my generation really. But so I'm watching and I'm like, well, something's going on, right? So that's a possible trend that
Mm.
certainly surprised me just as someone who wasn't following it. Um, and then, I mean, I think the other thing would probably be PSA and SGC. Um, I didn't see that coming. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe someone better source than I was expecting it, but I thought that was a really stunning, stunning move. And then recently, the last couple of weeks, Beckett is now under Collectivius Holdings.
Yeah, that's been a crazy story too.
Yes, and very much so still developing. I wish I knew more, and we're working on it.
It wasn't the
But
CEO. The CEO is under indictment right now.
so the lead executive of the parent company, formerly the parent
Yeah.
company, was indicted this year for like $2 billion of I'm going to get the actual charges wrong, and I don't want to say it because it's a bad thing to do, but various things relating to money that he did
Yes.
wrong according to the court, right? And then a few weeks later, um, there's all of a sudden a new holding company, which I have not confirmed is related to that indictment. However, many people have drawn lines connecting the two of those. I won't speculate, but many people are. And then they just raised, what was it? I think it was 200. I'm actually just looking it up because I want to get it right. Yeah, they got $250 million in financing from a company that's essentially debt financing. We don't know the structure of the deal, but $250 million, even if regardless of how it's structured, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Are they gonna be able to use that to recoup the losses of the last few years where they've fallen to fourth behind not just PSA, but SGC and CGC in grading? Maybe. And I think that would be really great for the hobby because Beckett has such a strong brand and legacy and history, right? I was just talking about someone who was asking me my opinion on whether they should buy like Beckett magazine #1 from '84 or whatever the
Hmm.
first price guide was. And it's like that's a meaningful brand. And you look back like 3 years ago, and it felt like PSA was one, but it felt like Beckett was fighting,
Yeah.
at the #2 spot. Now it's like where you know you don't see it anymore. So that's something that I'm really watching out for in 2025. How do they are they going to be serious players? Is this money that they were able to get going to actually be used to grow the company, or is it a little bit of a okay, we had to switch to a shell company type of thing, and this is just what you do when you're restructuring debt? I don't know, but um, it's fascinating. I'm excited to hear more. I mean, I'm pressing to hear more,
Yeah,
and I'm
I've
excited to
used Beckett to like kind of like with their database, kind of like organize my cards and like catalog my cards because that's a really nice tool to use. But it honestly feels like their pricing is just like it's really not up to snuff, and it's really truly not up to date. Like I have like a Hank Aaron autograph card in there that they say that's worth $4,000, and I absolutely know that it's not.
Yeah, I mean, it
It-
just they aren't in the modern world yet, right?
yeah,
Whereas you and I can both find out the price of something based on comps using whatever research tool, whether it's a third party platform like Card Ladders or Market Mover or just freaking eBay sold listings
yeah.
that we can confirm on Terapeak.
130point.com. Yeah,
Yeah, like we can probably get a lot better information by ourselves than looking at however dated that price guide might be whenever it was last updated. And I think most collectors are in that realm. I don't I'm sure there's still some who kind of depend on that price guide, but I frankly have never used it in any significant way other
yeah,
than curiosity.
yeah. So obviously, so this channel was created kind of like on the back of like kind of like the junk wax era from the late 1980s and early 1990s. Are we kind of in a new junk wax era? within the hobby itself, with so many proliferation of sets between Topps and Panini, and also just kind of like the manufactured, short print cards. Like how many number to 50 variations do we need to have? Because it seems like in like say like the new Bowman draft set, it almost seems like there's like 10 different cards like numbered to 50. And then there's like those new, like, you have like the popcorn cards to 5 now. You have like the bubblegum cards to 5 now. Like
The
how much?
Cactus Jack
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
collaboration.
And like how much is too much? And it just seems like it's overload, especially with like, pricing going way up. Um, like super jumbo boxes are costing nearly like $1,000 for 2024 Bowman draft. And then you have triple threads coming back from Topps, but those boxes cost more, and they took out one autograph and one relic per box. So instead of like the, going by threes like it usually was, three autographs and three relics, now it's down to 2 and 2.
Yeah, double threads.
Yeah, seriously.
But so I think this is one of the most interesting conversations to have right now about the hobby going forward. And it's one that nobody has a real answer to, right? I think the easy thing to say is, well, and this is from a total zero moral value or positive value, negative value judgment, they're selling. People are buying them. So from that standpoint, it's going to keep going. And from that metric, it's a success. Someone made a really good point to me. I recently talked to a couple dozen people and got their viewpoints on like 5 questions I asked them about 2024 and collecting. And somebody, it might have been Nat Turner, he made a really good point about like why we're not in the junk wax era, or at least what the difference is. And it was back then it was because they were printing a single set a billion times. And now they're printing a million different sets X amount of times. And I think that is a key distinction, right? Because that offers collectors the ability to have preferences. If you don't like the way a product looks, or you don't like what it comes with, you don't like the price, there's a million others. So that I think is a really key component. But then again, I mean, it's like, the Wemby Mercury set I thought was fascinating, right? Like it's like, imagine if they were doing that in 2003 with LeBron, right?
Oh yeah. But
And
then that Topps product would have been licensed though, compared to the Wemby product that is unlicensed.
yeah, I mean, that's
that also surprised me, seeing like how popular the unlicensed Topps Chrome basketball cards were, because I'm a big baseball card collector. And Panini does have nice stuff, but like being unlicensed, it really just doesn't, like, unless like I'm PCing, like I'm a big Philadelphia Phillies fan, so unless like I'm PCing, like if they have like Mike Schmidt autographs or something, like I might buy that with like a nice patch on it, but like I'm not really going with the unlicensed product. So it kind of surprised me seeing like Topps come out with unlicensed product for both basketball and football, while Panini still has, the licensed product on their end for what I guess another year or two.
Yeah, I think it's a year or two. I'm not sure if it's even finalized when it'll transition, but I think it's all going to be under one roof shortly, right? So that's almost like a weird interstitial period where this split exists. But I think it kind of just goes to like people want what they could get, right? This was the premier Wemby cards. These were the premier Wemby cards, are seen as that, marketed as that. They did a great job, in my opinion, of something that has been lacking in recent years, of putting, hey, this card actually has his debut jersey. And this is actually what's in it. It doesn't say event worn or game worn, or it wasn't touched by a friend of his one time and we're now going to attribute it. Like, they really said, so I think that made it really cool. But yeah, no, I mean, undoubtedly it's, whether it's a blemish or just like kind of an oddball thing to think about, yeah, it's weird. And you look back and it's going to be like, huh, so for Wemby's rookie year, this is the situation they were in, right? If you imagine if it was like that for LeBron, as you said. But I think it was in a matter of this is what was available on the market based on the deals that were signed, right? And it's like, what else could have been done, kind of
Mhm.
at that point. But no, I think it's a fascinating thing, and it shows what people prefer.
Do you feel over the long term, like say like 10, 15 years from now, put on like your Nostradamus hat, um, when like Wemby's, 10-time like all NBA,
Yeah.
one of the best centers of all time, if he gets there, knock on wood. Um, well, what cards of his do you think will be more popular? Do you think it will be the autograph rookie cards, which are unlicensed, or the Panini licensed products where you might have one of one game patches and so forth?
Man, I don't know. And I don't know that we have precedent, right?
Yeah.
I think it'll bear out in the next couple of years as things really settle. I mean, you can look at trends in the last few months since the release, right? But
Mhm.
I tend to, especially if we're looking to forecast way out, I tend to want to wait a while and see what the secondary market settles to. And I think it'll reveal what people gravitated towards and what they value. And then that'll sustain. And then people just all of a sudden accept that it uh, is just the accepted wisdom that X card is the one, right? Like that seems to be how it happens. There's always debates, right? 86 Fleer Jordan versus the Star Jordan.
Mhm.
It was accepted forever. The Fleer was the one, and now the Star had its crazy rise as a big story. Um, but it was decided it was the one. There was James Beckett wrote that the Star was an XRC, and that was just how it rolled, right? So it's something that's hard to predict. I mean, personally, I find the specific identification of I just think it's so cool to be like, this card has a piece of the jersey, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and what's also really cool is, so we know he wore multiple jerseys during the game, but one of them I've been unable to confirm whether it was the one that went into these cards, but one of them sold for 760,000, a little more than that, at Sotheby's.
Oh yeah.
So like that's just really cool to me.
Yeah.
And that's a crazy bet also when they bought that right during his rookie year. Like I was just like, holy cow. Um, and Wemby's obviously a unique player. It's like how many guys like Wemby have that hype around him and can sustain that? How often do they come along?
Yeah.
Right. Certainly LeBron's an example. Like did Zion have the same hype? Probably, but that faded real quick.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I can't even begin to predict what's going to be emerge as the real
I'm
favorite.
I'm assuming when Topps gets like the fully licensed, we'll see like how they have the MLB debut patch for baseball. We'll probably have the same for
Oh, they're
NBA
gonna,
and
yes.
NFL as well too.
Ben Burrows has reported, yeah, that they've explored it in different. There are. I would definitely say they will be doing that every
Like
sport.
my God, could you imagine like what a Wemby NBA debut patch card
Sick.
would have gone for? I mean, it probably would have sold over $4 million. I would assume, right?
Yeah, I mean, why
Easily.
not?
Yeah.
Why not? If that's decided, we wind back the clock, and that's from the beginning. We know that's coming out, and just becomes, you know, if it's decided by the wisdom of the crowd that that's the one, yeah, probably,
Yeah.
right? Certainly, there'd be bounties of absurd numbers, and yeah,
I get another fun question, real quick. Obviously, on the baseball side, a lot of like the multi-million dollar, cards are vintage with Mantle and Babe Ruth and Honus Wagner T206. And there is a Mike Trout card that did sell for over $1 million. Um, do you see any other modern MLB player currently who could have a card worth $1 million or more one day?
I mean, I hate to say it, but it feels like it's always going to be the sale of like a rookie that's super hyped up. I mean, I
Mhm.
wrote something somewhat recently. I want to, if you remember what the Paul Skeens, um, So Skeens had a card sell for $123,000, right?
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I'm totally looking this up.
Oh yeah, please do. Yeah.
'Cause I just want to make sure. Yeah. So I wrote a little column of like, so what I actually wrote about um, so the Pirates offer for the debut patch, if you want to value it out and look at the season tickets and stuff, which is not an exact science, it's like you can say it's 240K or $2 million, right? Whatever it is, it's a lot
Mhm.
of money. And I was kind of looking at it, I'm like, okay, what's Kershaw's top sale? And that actually occurred like in the last couple months, and it was 123K. So it's like, all right, we're saying that this guy's gonna have the same, obviously this is not actually what we're saying, but it's pricing in the fact that he will end up at the end of his career like Clayton Kershaw, arguably a
Yeah.
top 5, 10, whatever pitcher ever, certainly of the modern era. And to me, it's like, all right, that feels to me like a signal that we're gonna be valuing these. We're gonna be forever valuing hype and potential over actual performance.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you could buy a nice Babe Ruth card for what like a PSA 10 to super of Jason Dominguez autograph costs.
Oh, the
You,
Dominguez sale is always
you,
the one that's like,
you know, like it's crazy. Or
yeah,
even Jackson Holiday now. You know.
yeah, yeah. No, but I think that's the trend that I believe will continue because there's no sign of it slowing down, especially with the excitement, right? It's like the Pirates made that big splash, just covered everywhere, right?
Yeah.
When they made the announcements, like they didn't do that for an old Barry Bonds card.
No.
It was because it's a new release and it's exciting and oh my god, and maybe with stuff like debut patches that are so special, that will change things over time. Like maybe if you know, and also of course Otani does the most ridiculous stuff that you can imagine this season, and his cards do sell as they kind of should in
Yeah.
a market like this, right? So there's certainly exceptions, but I think broadly, yeah, I don't think we're gonna see guys at the end of their career, no matter how great of a Hall of Fame baseball reference page they have. I don't know that they're going to be competing with, you know, Baseball America's number one prospect when he's got a debut patch or whatever it is.
Yeah. Speaking of Otani, glad you brought him. Were you surprised how much that 50 home run ball sold for over $4 million?
So, of course, right? That's just an astounding. Like, I'm not going to be sitting here like as soon as I knew that it was hit, I thought it was going to be the most valuable baseball ever.
And it's nuts.
And I think there's a base. I think Babe Ruth's the first home run ever hit in an All-Star game was Babe Ruth's, and that I believe sold for 850K years ago,
Mm.
and it hasn't come up again. I think if that comes up again, I would imagine that would go for more, right? But yes, I was absolutely surprised. But as it was going on and the bidding kept going up, and we're talking about it and stuff, it's like, okay, there's the international appeal, and that was
True.
proven
Yeah.
out by the fact that it was purchased by a Taiwanese company that then was kind of using it in marketing and all that. And that's an unavoidable fact. I think honestly, the Freddie Freeman sale was more impressive to me
Yeah. The
because
Grand
it
Slam
didn't have
baseball.
those
Yeah.
same elements, right? Um, that to me, I don't know the buyer, but I know that some of the bidders were just straight up Dodgers fans that were like, "This was the best moment ever, and I'm rich and I want to own the freaking
Yeah.
ball." To me, that was like, and of course, it was definitely, it was on the heels of the Otani sale. People were like, "Oh, baseballs are selling for billions. It's always happened,
Yeah.
right?" But that was more surprising because it was like Freddie Freeman is not Shohei Otani, and the again it's harder to cite like, oh, there's some institutional people coming in, oh, there's the Japanese market, there's this and that. It felt like a more authentic excitement because it felt purely I imagine the buyer was really buying it because they were just like, wow, I love the Dodgers.
Mm,
This moment is something I'll remember the rest of my life. Connects me to Kirk Gibson, whatever it is,
yeah,
projecting onto this unknown person. But that shocked me. Shocked
I
me.
I kind of hope they get the ball signed by Freddie and by
I imagine
Shohei.
if they want,
Yeah,
they can
I
get
would hope so. Yeah, because I
it.
just feel like a baseball's a baseball, but like I would want it like if I'm a multimillionaire, like I would want personally that signed if I'm shelling out all that cash
I
for
think that
that Grand Slam baseball.
the to sign or not to sign is a great conversation. I love like because there are some real purists where it's like I don't want game worn memorabilia signed because that's not how it came off the court, right?
Really, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's not. It's not. It's more like I've just heard people say it, right?
Hmm.
But then you look at signed vintage cards are going nuts. We just had the record sale of the Mickey Mantle, um, probably the best signature of all 20. Um, go for I think it was 700 something thousand.
Because that used to be taboo was getting like the vintage rookie cards signed back in the day, like that.
Yeah,
And like I personally felt that way as well. So it was kind of surprising for me to see like all these vintage rookie cards coming up for sale and selling the way they are.
yeah, and it's something that whether you personally like it, I personally hate it, vice versa. It's something that I just find really cool about this, just the world of card collecting, of that, like, you can have trends like that.
Hmm.
You can have evolutions like that where people look at it and say, okay, how many mantles are graded PSA 8? A couple dozen. Well, there's only 20 that have been signed,
Yeah.
right? So not to say it's a pure, cold-hearted rarity evaluation, but like certainly plays into it. I think there's only 4 signed Leaf Jackie Robinson rookies,
Hmm.
which was one of the top few vintage cards, signed vintage card sales prior to this. So that's a huge trend that I think will probably continue because that excitement was pretty enormous. They did, Golden did a single lot auction of it, which is notable. And then also, like, again, pop reports are only becoming more important. People are again with when you come out with 1 million products a year and everything's serial numbered out of X, Y, and Z, like pop reports are becoming more important. People are probably more astute to the fact, oh, there's only 20 of these.
Yeah.
Let's compare it to that. And the PSA goes for over 1 million.
And that kind of like leads into one of my last questions is what do you think we will see from the hobby in 2025 and beyond? And do you have like any predictions of what might be coming?
So I think that we'll continue to see PSA and eBay's integration become more powerful. I think Fanatics uh, will continue on the path they've been. Not only with their acquisition of PWCC and running the premier auctions there. I think they'll probably get more into memorabilia and stuff like that in the premier auctions.
Mhm.
They sold a jersey. I'm trying to remember. It was a Chiefs Super Bowl jersey recently. It's kind of the only one that they sold, but it did pretty well. And of course, the partnership that they have with Sotheby's, where they're doing these really kind of highly curated, kind of flashy sales of super high end cards. And the idea being that these super rich people who maybe were only assumed to be interested in buying art prior to this, right? Sotheby's has been around for hundreds of years. All of a sudden, there's younger people with money, right? And their interests are in Jordan. Their interests, man, now Exquisite's 20 years old, right?
Mhm.
The, now there's a different generation with money. So we're seeing that. I think we'll continue to see that. And then I also think, there's a lot of stuff in the air of with the consolidation we've seen, everything we've talked about already. Like, how will that play out? Will it benefit the consumer? Will it give rise to one of the other grading companies or whatever other kind of value add services and companies out there that aren't affiliated because they're able to offer competition or a new proposition that wasn't necessarily available or isn't necessarily available in the incumbents. That's something I'm really hoping to see because it's healthy.
Mhm.
And then just, I don't think we're going to see, I think we're going to see a lot more, not a lot more, but I think the success of the Wemby Mercury stuff, I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that like super limited edition high end products based on a single player will become a fixture. And as those licenses and everything align, that becomes a lot easier.
Mhm.
Um, and lastly, I think like we're seeing different auction houses get more wide in their offerings. I think a really interesting example is REA, which is um, known for vintage. They've set records and they've sold T206 Honuses. They've sold they sold the Ruth Baltimore News for millions, and that's what they were known for, right? They had a sale this year where they were selling like Steve Jobs stuff, right?
Yes, yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And like a Joe Burrow jersey, and I was talking to them, and they were like, "Yeah, no, we're known for vintage, and we are." They were saying like we're the best, we're the greatest in that category. We're great at it, but we're able to do other stuff, and so that expansion, that recognition, that you don't need to be pigeonholed, is something I think we will certainly continue to see.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today,
Of course.
Will. And yeah, great insight about what happened this past year and what we're expecting moving forward. And please go to collect.com and see more of Will Stern's stories. And I'll link his social media stuff in the description below. Thanks again, Will, and happy holidays.
Thanks for having me. You too, Matt.
Take care.